Thank you so much. First of all, I am so happy to be here. My name is Sabrina Paganoni, and I work at the Healy Center for ALS at Mass General Hospital in Boston. I know I met many of you in person or on Zoom before, so it's very nice to see familiar faces and also meet new people. No, over the last several years, I've also had the pleasure of meeting many people with upper motor neuron diseases like PLS and HSP. In fact, as we were starting the webinar, I was remembering with Norma and Tina, when we went to the annual conference a few times before the pandemic, and it was so wonderful to meet with many of you that have HSP or PLS, and so over the years, I really developed an interest, a special interest in these conditions. And recently, the reason actually for this webinar is that in December of 2024, we held a wonderful conference in PLS. I know some of you were there, so specifically talking about PLS right now more than HSP. So focusing on that specific group of people living with PLS, which is such a rare condition. And as you may know, there's been only a total of 3 conferences, international conferences on PLS from a kind of scientific point of view. Obviously, the Spastic Paraplegia Foundation has lots of great conferences with a lot of people living with the disease and experts going and talk. But this was actually a gathering of all the people, pretty much everyone who does any research in the medical field on PLS. We gathered in Montreal in December 2024. And that was only the 3rd time that such a meeting happened. As you know, PLS is very rare. There's only a few thousand people living with PLS in the US and also in general globally. So, it doesn't receive the attention it deserves, and we want to change that. So we want to make sure that there is more research, more attention, because obviously it's so important for all the people who are living with PLS, like many of you. So, Dr. Mitsumoto, a dear colleague, from very distinguished colleague from Columbia University, organized these 3 conferences. The first happened in 2004, 2005. The second happened in 2019. And the most recent one, we were very happy to meet in Montreal in December 2024. And so the proceedings of the conference, so we really wanted to make the material available to anyone who has PLS or is interested in PLS. And so because of that, we have a video, I think it's a 4-hour video that the Spastic Paraplegia Foundation kindly helped us upload on YouTube. So I will put a plug here for the Spastic Paraplegia website, and also the link to the YouTube that contains essentially the recording of the conference. So feel free to check it out. It's available for everyone to see. And then I understand it's 4 hours and it's very dense technical material. So if you don't have the time to watch it, or if you have questions after that, I also want you to know that we wrote a paper, which is a little bit easier to digest. It's a little bit shorter. It's under review, and it's going to be published hopefully soon at an international scientific journal. That's always the process. Unfortunately, when we publish scientific, it's good actually that there is a process that's that ensures the rigor of the science. And so we have to submit the proceedings, then it has to go through peer review, and we have to respond to questions. And so hopefully very soon it will be available, and we'll make it available open access, meaning you will not need a subscription to the journal, but it will be available for everyone. So I just wanted to share that background. And so after the conference, we realized that many people, actually 1,200 people, over 1,200 people already watched the video. And there are many questions. Obviously, people may have questions because the video is just a recording. There's no opportunity to ask questions live. And so thanks to the Spastic Paraplegia Foundation, we organized the first webinar. I know many of you were on that, and I'm sure new people are joining today. And so we answered many questions on the webinar. We didn't have the time to answer all the questions, because I'm so pleased to see that the community is so engaged and you all have great questions. So We answered a few during the previous webinar, and then we said, okay, let's make sure that we have another opportunity to meet together with the PLS community, and that's why we're here today. I'm happy to answer the questions that were not answered the previous time, and I'm sure you may have more questions. So I'll stop there, and maybe, Norma, I feel like we can start maybe with the questions from the people who are on this call, because I already see one from Lynn, and then obviously I also have a list of questions that were not answered the previous time. But thank you also. I see, Norma, that you put the SPF Foundation website in the chat. And can people go there and get access to the video from there?
Yes, they can. And let me show you how to get there. At the bottom of every page on our website is an entire row of social media platforms. Find the icon that corresponds to YouTube, click right on it, and you can see all of the information that's on there. And we can make sure that we send out to you guys the actual specific link that Dr. Paganoni references, and we'll try to grab that and put it in the chat box as well. So you can find all that information on there to get to the social media.
Thank you.
Dr. Paganoni.
Thank you so much. And once the paper is published and available, I'll be sure to send you the link, and so you can circulate it to all your membership or anyone who's been on these webinars. Yeah.
That would be great, because what we like to do is put that near your name under research so that we can let people just immediately go there, find you, and find that information. So thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to say one thing before we start with the questions, that we also want to keep the momentum going at the scientific meetings, because obviously, you know, in order to promote and support and foster new research in PLS being so rare, we need to continue to put it at the forefront. You know, we need to keep putting it sort of front and center at every scientific conference, so that, you know, more researchers, more companies, more investigators are interested and see the excitement and the engagement of the community. And so to this point, so you may also know that in addition to the international MND or motor neuron disease symposium that happens every year, it was in Montreal in December last year, and it's going to be in San Diego in December of this year. We also have the national ALS or MND meeting that happens every October in Florida. It's called NEALS, Northeast ALS Consortium. So the name ALS is in the title of the meeting, but again, it also provides a home for PLS research, because sort of the two are different, but we also try to have research, promote research and NEALS. And so the SPF has kindly been supporting, fellowships or poster prizes. And so this year we're going to have a lot of more research that will be submitted to NEALS. And we're trying to think about other, we're trying to think about follow-up meeting at the International MND Symposium on PLS, again, to keep the momentum going. As I said earlier, there were only 3 conferences on PLS at a scientific meeting like the International MND Symposium so far, and we want to make it an annual gathering, at least, whether we do a longer day every few years or a shorter meeting, we want to continue to do that. So I guess for you guys specifically, concretely, there will be poster prizes. You'll be able to learn about the research, the poster prize, it will be known what the research is, and that's going to be in October at the NEALS meeting. And then still to be determined, but we're going to have some sort of gathering at the San Diego meeting, which is the annual international symposium. I just want you to know that we're really trying to promote PLS and continue to keep it front and center. We don't want another 5 years to go by until we have another, technical scientific meeting like that. We want to produce videos like the one that, again, has been seen by already more than 1,200 people, on a regular basis, so that you can be posted on all the research and everyone in the world can see it. So with that, do you want to go over the questions, Norma? Do we want to start with the questions here from people who are
If you would like to, that would be fantastic. You can pick those up and grab them. There's one that's way up there. It says PLS is a diagnosis of exclusion like ALS.
Yes, it is. I would say that it's a particularly tricky diagnosis. And I see, Lynn, you also mentioned, it's sometimes, people can be misdiagnosed, absolutely. Or what can happen is that the disease let's talk about motor neuron disease. So what is motor neuron disease? That's a disease of the motor neurons. meaning the upper motor neurons and or the lower motor neurons. That's the umbrella term. That's actually the term that's used most commonly internationally. And that's actually a correct term. So if we think about, the brain and how it works, we have the movements or the motor system. So movements, walking, talking, using your arms or hands. Movements are controlled by something called the upper motor neurons that go from the brain to the spine, and the lower motor neurons that go from the spine to the muscles. Now, the disease can start, motor neuron disease can start in the upper motor neurons and stay in the upper motor neurons, for example, PLS. The disease can start in the lower motor neurons and stay in the lower motor neurons. That's a different type of disease. Or you can have both, the upper and the lower motor neurons being affected to different extents, at the same time. And that's ALS proper, what we actually call ALS. However, things can change over time. So one can start with upper motor neurons, and then the lower motor neurons can become involved later. So one can, it's possible that someone's disease may look like PLS initially and then could change into ALS. However, that when that happens, generally that happens within the first 4 years. So that's why there is a 4-year cutoff in many of the diagnostic criteria for PLS. In other words, if your disease starts in the upper motor neurons and stays there for 4 years, we have a high degree of certainty, not 100%, nothing is 100%, however, pretty good confidence that that's PLS. If it stays as PLS, if it stays in the upper motor neurons for 4 years, then we have a reasonable degree of confidence that it's PLS. But within those 4 years, if then the lower motor neurons get involved, the diagnosis will change, will go from PLS to ALS. So people can be misdiagnosed because maybe there was a problem in the diagnostic process, or the disease can change, especially in the first 4 years. So I don't know if that's clear. Let me know if I explained that well or not, because Norma, you're muted. Sorry. Norma, you're muted.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry
Yeah.
about that. Yes, that was very clear. I even wrote a note about that. So I appreciate that. So does there mean that the next question is, are there any causative genes for PLS for that to be determined prior
Yeah,
to
that's
4 years?
actually another question that's very important and very relevant and timely. Sort of historically, we didn't identify many genes for PLS. There were more genes that were discovered for ALS than for PLS. So for PLS, for many years, people thought, oh, maybe there isn't a gene, unless very rarely there were a few that were identified. But more recently, it's been shown that on occasion, some genes can give rise to PLS. This is very rare, so I would expect the vast majority of people with PLS to not have a causative gene, or at least not one that we know about right now in 2025. On occasion, a few rare genes have been associated with disease. It is possible that we will learn more about other genes that are not known today in the future, or it's also possible that many cases of PLS, just like ALS, cannot be reconduced to just one gene, but maybe it's a combination of genes that we don't know about, and maybe it's an interaction between somebody's genetic code and the environment. So we still don't know right now. But definitely the situation has changed in the sense that until 10 years ago, again, no genes were associated with PLS, and now on occasion, very rarely, some people have been found to have some genes.
Mm. Very good. That is so good to know that. So we have someone here that says, do you recommend any particular doctor in New York, in the New York area?
Yeah, I would say that, again, historically, PLS, because of the rarity, didn't have a dedicated home in hospitals. And that's why oftentimes people with PLS were seen in the ALS clinic. not because they have ALS, but because there wasn't a dedicated PLS home in most hospitals. And also because of the complexities around the diagnosis that I explained before, because the two diseases are different, but again, they are related, right? We're still talking of the motor neurons. And sometimes, as I said before, within the first 4 years after the first symptoms, there may be uncertainty in terms of what is this really? Is this PLS? Is this ALS? That's why normally, people are seen in ALS clinics. And so there are very excellent clinics, ALS clinics in the New York area at the major hospitals. So it could be, Columbia University, it could be Mount Sinai, New York University. So I would recommend one of the big academic centers where I have many colleagues that really specialize in ALS and PLS, again, because of the close relationship. And maybe, Norma, you can tell us more. Now, I know that the Spastic Paraplegia Foundation recently started to support centers of excellence for upper motor neurons, both HSP and PLS. So again, hopefully there will be a more dedicated focus on PLS in the future in hospitals. Maybe you can tell us more about that?
Thank you, Dr. Sabrina. I appreciate that. Yes, we do have that information on our website. We have a physician's directory that you can download, and you may be able to find that person that you're looking for in whatever city and state in the nation. So please take time to look at that. We also, for you guys that know this, our foundation has supported the research of Dr. Mitsumoto, who is at Columbia University and now is continuing that research under Dr. Lee. And we've had him on an SPF Talks recently, and you can find that on our YouTube channel. So, yeah, as you guys are looking for that right physician or that clinician, it's very important as you guys see one that works well for you, reach out, let us know who that is, and we'll put those on the list as well. So any of that information you guys need help with, let us know.
Great point. Yeah, great point. I will say, for example, at our hospital, at Mass General Hospital, again, historically, we have seen people with PLS and HSP in the ALS clinic, and that's why I have had the pleasure of meeting many of you and many people with PLS and HSP, and so we work together with ALS in the same clinic, and we have physical therapists and occupational therapists, speech therapists, etc., who have a lot of experience in ALS, but also HSP and PLS. And then more recently, over the last couple of years or so, my colleague, Dr. Craig Blackstone, who has spent decades at the NIH making breakthrough discoveries for HSP in particular, he moved to our hospital, and we are so excited to have him. And so in partnership with the SPF, with the Spastic Paraplegia Foundation, he has now started a center of excellence for upper motor neuron diseases, and we work very closely with him. So specifically, obviously, HSP, which, I mean, again, is maybe the global leader, one of the global leaders with Dr. Fink and others on HSP, but also we are collaborating very closely on PLS, because again, there is a continuum. And so we are sharing resources, we are sharing, tools, so that for people with PLS who are a little bit kind of in between, between the kind of the HSP clinic and the ALS clinic, but we share a lot of resources, and a lot of the staff, again, is very experienced. So I feel like, thanks to your support from the SPF to these centers of excellence focused on upper motor neuron diseases, we can really get the best out of this, and really try to leverage both the ALS resources, but also the upper motor neuron specific resources. So I don't know, Norma, if you have anything else to add.
Well, thank you so very much for all of that clarity. And, there's so much information that's going on, and to let folks understand that what we're trying to create in that Centers of Excellence network, it's a research network of our clinicians that are understanding what's going on with people, so that when they come into the office, when a patient comes in and they are located in one of these locations, and we're hoping that that's going to spread like a spider web, across the United States and internationally as well, so that people will be diagnosed early and they will know what they need to get as far as all of those testing, and all of those folks are, coming together so that they understand what our patients need, what our people need for helping to get that early diagnosis as quickly as possible. What we're looking at, Dr. Sabrina, is perhaps maybe a continuance of that might also include a tail end approach. is that you've got folks that have, you know, spasticity or speaking issues, you know, spasmodic dystonia, you know, any of those kind of things that are also as a symptom, so that when these folks come in and they've heard about a chemical or a compound or, you know, some kind of medical intervention, then we need those clinicians to be just as informed, so that when they come in and say, I need to see about this prescription, then it's going to be processed, that folks will be able to get that kind of medication. So that's what we're also looking at as we, you know, move forward in the future.
Absolutely.
I think having clinicians very informed so that they can, you know, do what they need. So there is a link, oh, you guys, in the chat box where Dina has put in there the international conference and the YouTube. That's the link to get to that. The next question, Dr. Paganoni, is from Susan, and she has two questions. Do you see that long email, that long chat box? Can you grab that and see that? Or is it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first, very good question. So the first question is about riluzole and PLS. I mean, I have to say, I'm a little bit torn on this one. So the reality is that there's never been a study of riluzole in PLS with specific conclusions. So from the point of view of being sort of a purist, from the strict point of view of science and evidence, no. The short answer to your question is there is no direct evidence that riluzole plays a role in PLS. That said, as we just discussed, while the diseases are different, they all affect the motor neurons, and we're all under the same umbrella of the motor neuron disease. So the subsequent question is it possible that maybe there could be some effect of riluzole on PLS? I cannot formally exclude that, again, because we've never done the test, and so the reality is that we don't know. There is a lot of variability in practice. Some people with PLS do take riluzole, or the physicians prescribe it, again, because essentially we don't know. And so one could say, well, with good monitoring, the side effects are relatively mild. You do need to check your liver function test, but assuming that you don't have side effects or liver problems, there's not much to lose, I guess, by trying it. But do we have evidence that it really helps? We don't really have the evidence. I will say that also it's approved specifically for people with ALS, and people with ALS do not experience a specific sort of symptomatic benefit. In other words, people do not perceive that they are feeling better on riluzole. And so what we do know is that it slows down, based on the trial data, it slows down ALS to some extent, about 10%. But 10% is good, but it's not something that people would realize. Like, when you take a symptom control medicine, let's say you have a headache and you take Tylenol, you immediately perceive an effect because it's a clear, we call it symptomatic treatment. So it kills a symptom, like it takes away a symptom, like a headache, for example. But when you have these sort of the medications that try to slow down the disease a little bit to some extent, while the data shows that the person who takes the medication doesn't perceive it. So that doesn't mean that it doesn't have an effect. It's just that it's very hard to tell. And so that's true in ALS, where it's approved for, and so even more so in PLS. So, please discuss with your physician. Again, we don't have any direct evidence that it works. Could it maybe work? Again, we cannot fully exclude it, but we don't have any evidence.
So it's one of those, it's worth a try, or the right to try. That may be something that if somebody is desperately, and all we can do is suggest that you make sure that you read all that you can read about those things, about the medications.
Right, and talk to your physician, about side effects, and
yeah. And then I think there's some more, there's another question in that person's comment.
Yeah, that's it. It's very important to follow up on the genetics. Thank you for writing. I believe that you said you have a family history of ALS, but you yourself actually have PLS, and there are no genes that your doctors were able to find. That's actually something that's been described. In some families, some people in the family can have ALS, and some people in the family can have PLS. So that's been described. And again, that speaks to the fact that the two conditions are different, but not completely different. They're sort of a continuum. They are related in some ways. And if you think about the anatomy, again, the upper motor neurons and the lower motor neurons, for some reason that we don't fully understand, in people with PLS, the motor neuron disease remains restricted to the upper motor neurons. And in people with ALS, the disease affects both the upper and the lower. And that can happen in the same family, which is actually a little bit mysterious. Why does that happen? So it could be that the same gene gives rise to two different manifestations of the disease. Again, this has been described when I was saying on occasion people have been found to have a genetic cause of PLS that's actually in genes that are also known to cause ALS. So for example, on occasion, some people that have a family history of ALS have been found to have the C9 mutation, C9 gene that causes ALS, but in some of their relatives, it causes PLS. I see that for you specifically, no gene has been identified. And so again, it's possible that there may be genes that we don't know about yet, or that we cannot test for yet in 2025, or it could be that in your particular family, it's more a predisposition, but then there has to be some sort of other environmental factor or trigger that causes it. So I wish we had, kind of a more clear or complete explanation, but actually it's not the first time that I've heard that, right? That basically in the same family, some people can have ALS and some people can have PLS. It could be that maybe, for example, for you, since you have PLS, somehow you have also a modifier gene or something different that prevents the disease from affecting the lower motor neurons. In fact, I would say that's actually something that's very important to understand. How come that in your case, the disease is only in the upper motor neurons, and maybe in your family members, it affects both the upper and the lower? I'm sure that, it would be interesting, if you want to participate in any biomarker study or any research studies, there's definitely a lot to learn from that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sabrina. That almost sounds like she's got HSP. It's hereditary, so that's interesting. There was a comment here from Tim. There's a good article on a website, NIH website. And then Susan come back and asked about the Center as a study for AMPRA,
Empara, yeah. So that's
preliminary results.
Yeah, so I don't, the results were never published, and it's more anecdotal, meaning some people feel that they have a benefit, and other people don't. Also, for every medication, one can have some side effects. And so in fact, I see another comment from Tim. Thank you for sharing. You personally, based on your what you wrote in the chat, you wrote that you had some benefit from Ampira or dalfampridine in walking time, but you had also side effects such as insomnia and fatigue, and that outweighed the benefit. So again, so I feel like there's been some anecdotal experience of some people who have reported some benefits in walking ability using Ampira. However, there's also people who have reported side effects, as you just described and as you just wrote in the chat. So it's always a matter of risk benefits. You're correct that there has been a study on Ampira and in PLS. The results have never been published. It was led by a colleague, and I don't know exactly when the studies will be published, the results will be published. I will say personally, I've had a few people that we see in clinic take Ampira, and again, in my experience, it's never been a transformative drug. So I've never had anyone tell me, oh, I feel completely different on Ampira. There's been some people who felt no difference, and some people who felt a little bit better walking ability. Again, it's very personal. So it's one of those things, again, that it's not approved for PLS, it's approved for MS, a different disease that also affects the upper motor neurons. So talk to your physician, and if they feel like giving it a try, obviously you can, knowing that in my experience, it's not a transformative drug, but maybe it could help somebody. I don't know. Again, we don't have direct evidence.
There's a question from Tim that says, what is the best method to find potential trials or treatments in a consolidated source? I'm also going to an ALS COE center and do not feel that is necessarily a good source of information on potential treatments.
Yeah. So, to be honest with you, there are more trials and research studies for ALS than there are for PLS. And that's, sadly reflects sort of the fact that PLS is so rare. And that's why we're trying to keep it front and center. That said, there are some research studies for PLS. At this time, the research studies that are available for PLS are not medication oriented. In other words, they're not interventional trials, or they're not trials of new medications. However, there are studies that are meant to learn more about the disease. So you can contribute to funding more about the genetics of the disease, or about the biomarkers or other aspects of the disease. For example, I see that Linda kindly posted sort of one such study. And so people can indeed register for different biomarker registries or data registries. Linda, do you want to talk about this study? I know you are involved with them in particular.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I just
Yes.
unmuted. Yes, it's because my whole point is to bring more people so that research can happen, because I'm convinced that we're not that rare. The PLS patients are not that rare. Can you still hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Everyone froze.
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. So everyone seemed frozen. I'm having a hard time with the Zoom link today. It's ridiculous.
Oh, no, you're
Anyway,
doing well. We can hear you fine, Linda.
remember at the PLS conference, there was one PLS patient that stood up and said there was a bunch of us on Facebook.
Yes.
Well, that Facebook came up again at another conference that I attended in Montreal, and this one was about AI. It was completely different, but researchers have a hard time using Facebook or social media platforms, because you get all kinds of misinformation and disinformation. It's difficult to actually find credible stuff. So I thought it would be better for patients to find patients. And if I register them in CBIG, then it's the information that you get is already usable. It's already meaningful information for medical research. It's already done for you. That's my logic behind all of this. Would that be
That's a great point, Linda. That's a great point. I will say it's wonderful that there are social media platforms where people living with PLS or other diseases can connect to one another, especially because of the rarity of the disease. Many years ago, people would not find anyone who had the same condition, and now you can go out and find people and find source of support or ideas, and bounce ideas off one another. From a research perspective, because of, again, the issues that you mentioned, data privacy and other things, it's very hard for researchers. Like there are regulations for a good reason. I mean, I guess sometimes the regulations can make research slower, but I will acknowledge that regulations are also important for everyone's privacy and safety, and so it's very hard for us to simply go out on social media and find patients, right? Because one can, I guess, do it, but there are privacy laws and other things that are actually important to respect, and I think they protect us all, even if sometimes they get in the way. So I would say, Linda, what you're doing is absolutely fantastic. I really, I see people are asking, how do you register for CBIG? Maybe you can share this, because again, if people self-register for research studies, whether this one or others that are run by universities, then it's easier for us to get in contact with them, because again, that happens under the umbrella of sort of research confidentiality. We simply cannot go out on Facebook and find people. Basically, that would not be allowed. So Linda, maybe you can tell us more about this.
Yeah, Linda, if you will put that link in the chat box, and then I want to tell you guys too about the foundation is kind of doing its own little research project, and that will be coming out very soon. We're putting together a survey that basically talks about your symptoms and the things that you are experiencing. So we're asking, optionally for you to put your email address on it, but the rest of it is really about the things that you're experiencing and the journey that you've been on to get to this point. So what we can do when we go to Washington, D.C. in October, and for those of you that can join us, we'd love to have you in person. For those of you that can't be there in person, we'd love to have you virtually. And we will be, live feeding, live streaming that across our website. But in between now and then, we've got a team of folks on the foundation membership that is working on a survey that can help you tell us about what you're experiencing and what's going on so that we can collectively take that information to Washington, D.C. when we go in October and we can say, here's who we are. Here's the statistics collectively on the things that we're experiencing, where we're located, what's happening to our bodies. And we want to see what they can do to help us to get to some kind of therapeutic that can slow this progression down. And that's what we're trying to look for. So you guys, there's all kinds of resources that we've got for everybody that can participate in these ways. We're wanting you to see the things that we're trying to help you do to get your voice heard and to be able to say, I'm more than a lab rat. I'm more than a statistic. I am a person that's dealing with these things, and here's who we are. And so that's what we want to be able to get that information collectively together so that we can show that we exist and put those things in those reports that, like Dr. Paganoni is talking about and what Linda's talking about, that actually gives you that pathway to that information that may be able to bring back some healthy choices for you, for us, for all of us. So that's my little infomercial. So get ready for that survey to come out. Linda, did you put that over in the chat box so people can find that information?
I put my email address in the chat box.
Okay, that'd be
The
great.
registration is different. The link is different. It's disease dependent.
Okay,
It just sorts it out for CBIG. And also it's easier for me to do follow-ups rather than doctors. It gets lost if you do it that way.
okay, there you go.
Anyway,
So if they've
so
got questions, they can reach out to you. So you got your email address in there.
absolutely.
Good.
Absolutely. If they don't get it
Thank
off the chat, they can get it off of you. Figure it
Yes.
out. It's my name. There you go.
There we go.
Anyway,
That's what we're trying to do, is get the information out. Now,
yeah.
Steve has got a question over here, Dr. Sabrina. It
Yeah.
says, how has the government cuts to grants and reports of researchers leaving the country to find work impact your research?
Yeah, I mean, I cannot comment in general. I can only comment about things that relate to my own research. You know, at our center, we've always had a diversified portfolio of funding. And so a lot of our funding is actually, in addition to the government, we have a lot of funding from industry for specific projects, as well as from foundations and private donors. And I think, fortunately, because of that, again, the research is continuing, at least as far as I'm concerned. And that also speaks to the importance of groups like the foundation or philanthropy. It's important, I feel like, for people to advocate for research and really support that, because again, that's really very powerful and helps the work continue, even when maybe there may be other changes to other funding sources. So from my point of view, again, the research is continuing.
Well, and one of the things too that we're talking about when we were talking about the SP CERN and what we do, obviously, you guys, it's all about money, right? Research is about money. Research is about trying to support that cost. That's what it comes down to. So the foundation is constantly raising money. We apologize that we have to send out those emails to say, oh, don't forget about this donation, or don't forget about this event, or maybe even Pampered Chef. We're doing that because those organizations are also giving back to us. But we're hopeful that there is an application that our SP CERN has submitted to NIH. And if that does get approval, then we're looking at the opportunity of expanding that and having these resources available for a lot of people. And so that's one of the things that, as you guys are thinking about the possibility of any research that you want to participate with, here's where you can do that. And then we can direct those funds so that those things can help those doctors and continue in the things that they're doing. So, there may be some interruptions of funding sources as we go along, but we are interrupted because the money isn't there to pay for those things. So we have to come to the table with our portion. And so we've got organizations that we partner with and that we're trying to also add a little bit of our money to a little bit of their money in order for all of us to have a piece of that research and to be able to move this further down into finding a therapeutic or what's going on with our motor neurons. So anything we could do to help you guys, we want to
Yeah.
make sure that you know that.
And I do want to say that the importance of philanthropy and foundations has always been central, and so now, I mean, I think, I want to thank you for all the work that you're doing, because actually the reason I personally developed an interest in PLS, and we have started to do more work, is because of an initial grant, maybe 12 years ago, from the Spastic Paraplegia Foundation. And so the importance of this is not just the specific research project, but also the fact that, we get more people involved in the field, right? We have more people who are doing research, and then they try to get together and organize subsequent meetings and research projects, etc.
Dr. Paganoni, there's a question over here from Dennis that says, if the testing of the C9ORF72 gene shows repeats are in the normal size range, does that eliminate the possibility of PLS developing into ALS?
Not really. So the C9 gene is actually the most common genetic cause of ALS. If you look at, let's say, 100 people with ALS, not PLS, but ALS, about, depending on the study, about 7 or 8 may have ALS due to the C9 mutation. Depends a little bit on the study and the background population. But so in other words, it's actually a relatively common cause of ALS. That said, as I said earlier, most people with PLS, most people with PLS don't have a gene, but also most people with ALS do not have a gene. In fact, when you look at the entire ALS population, only about 15%, so 15 out of 100, will have one gene, whether it's C9, which is the most common, or another gene. Even people with ALS, most of them do not have a clearly identifiable gene. And so I don't think that, the genetic testing can be helpful, mostly when it's positive, in the sense that it can definitely confirm the diagnosis from a genetic point of view in ALS, and as I said earlier, occasionally in PLS. However, a negative test does not negate the diagnosis of PLS or ALS. As I said earlier, we base sort of, there's actually data from previous natural history studies that show that the likelihood of converting from PLS to ALS dramatically decreases over time. So if somebody is going to change, from PLS to ALS, that generally most likely happens during the first 4 years. Again, nothing is 100%, but we take a time approach because, the studies have shown that if somebody were to develop ALS after being initially thought to have PLS, that generally happens within the first 4 years. That's why we can never give a definitive diagnosis of PLS unless 4 years have passed. That's the reason for the criteria. Yeah.
Well, Tim over here in the chat box has got a question about many medications. Do you see that? And then you might want to look at all of those and
yeah, so there's benzodiazepines, clonazepam, diazepam, and others. So that's one group. So that group of medications can help with stiffness or spasticity. I will say they're generally not my go-to for spasticity. I generally start with baclofen or tizanidine. However, clonazepam and diazepam can have other benefits. Sometimes they're helpful for the jaw being locked if baclofen or tizanidine are not enough. And also, obviously, benzodiazepines are also used for other reasons, for example, for anxiety. So again, it depends on the specific symptoms. So it's not kind of a one size fits all. It depends on whether that's indicated for you. In terms of gabapentin and pregabalin, so those are another class of medications. They're generally indicated for pain. And so neuropathic pain specifically. And so they can be helpful, if you have that. Dantrolene is a treatment for spasticity. I will say I generally don't use that. I think it's an older medication. And again, we have other medications as well. So other medications, amantadine, there's, again, there's a question about amantadine. I see another chat. I'm sorry, there's many different questions, but there was also, I think, a question, actually, in the email that was sent earlier before this webinar, some people asked about a number of drugs that are also used for Parkinson's, so, or Parkinsonian syndromes or dystonia, like Cinemet, etc. So all these other drugs depend a little bit on the symptoms. So they're not, amantadine, etc., they're not a treatment for PLS per se, but we know that sometimes, people that are living with PLS may also develop other symptoms. And so depending on the specifics, somebody could also add those treatments. So I wouldn't say that amantadine or Cinemet or other drugs for more movement disorders are indicated for everyone with PLS. I wouldn't say that. But on occasion, depending on the specific presentation, one can consider those medications.
That's the point there, Dr. Paganoni. I think for many people that we hear from on a regular basis, is that we know that there's got to be research that actually gets to, the real result of what happened, how did it happen, and how do I fix it, or how do I, keep it from being affecting into the future generations. So, but what right now, many of our people are holding on to the hope that there can be at least some relief, some intervention of some kind of compound that might take away a symptom. And that's
Right.
one of the things that, we want to see, the work of our SP CERN, so that we can help to identify those clinicians that are saying, this is a possibility, and here's some research about this,
Yeah.
and if you guys want to try this, let's see what we need to do to get you into some of those kind of trials. And I think that is what it will help a lot of people to feel a lot better about what's going on in their bodies, because a lot of people are suffering badly, and we
Right.
need to find ways that we can help with those symptoms.
Yeah, and I do want to say I would definitely agree with that, and I feel like it's important that you talk to your physician and develop sort of a long-standing relationship with somebody who has experience with PLS. And I want to explain that. First of all, I see a comment in the chat. Louise says something very important. Some of these medications have a risk for falls, which we're trying to avoid. Absolutely. So any medication can have side effects. So it's always a balance in terms of your specific clinical situation, your other medications, your other medical problems, and a balance of risk and benefits. And only somebody who has experience with PLS, first of all, and sees you over time can help you with. Because even for myself, when I have patients, I have to say it's very hard to sort of say, okay, is this medication good or not for a specific person in abstract. It depends on the specific condition, and everyone reacts differently. Some people react positively to small doses of medications. Other people require bigger doses. So again, it's more, for example, I see a question here about sort of burning mouth syndrome. Again, if it depends really on the context and the cause. If people have neuropathic pain, so pain that's not caused by a specific, let's say, musculoskeletal problem or an infectious disease problem or something else that can be targeted, but it's neuropathic pain from a nerve origin, then, for example, gabapentin and pregabalin are a class of medication that's typically used for that. But so that could be a possibility. But again, it's very hard to say in abstract, because it depends on kind of the results of the diagnostic tests and your specific condition. That's why I think that what Norma said is very important. We need to learn more about the best way to treat these symptoms. Also understanding that because of the variability of the condition and the rarity of the condition, it really takes somebody who sees a lot of these patients to be able to counsel you. It's not just kind of, there isn't a textbook, let's put it like that. It's both things that we borrow from other diseases, but also lived experience of lived experience of the person with PLS, as well as personal experience from the physician, who can follow somebody over time and see everyone reacts very differently.
That may be one of those things that many of you guys may be, part of your doctor network that's got like that my chart. Do you guys have that my chart? And you have that information about you, and it hits your app and it tells you when your appointments are. That may be one of those things that you guys are feeling symptoms, you're feeling, issues concerning yourselves. You might want to put a note out there on your my chart to say, hey, is there something that can help with this symptom that I'm experiencing and have been for a long time and I'm suffering because of, and explain what's going on with your body. Put that out there so that you're having this dialogue with your doctor, and it's in your my chart. They can respond back to you. That would be a way to kind of bring more information to your doctors so that they're beginning to understand what's happening with PLS. Print off some of these documents that Dr. Sabrina is going to be soon having as a publication. Take that to your doctor. Let them say, here's the latest stuff that's going on, and we need more assistance with some of the symptoms that we're dealing with, so that you're having that relationship with him or her. So Tina over here says that my mother had bulbar palsy, and now I have a limb onset left foot, and now starting in the right foot. Do we both have ALS? By the way, I tested negative in all the ALS genes.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, I know it sounds kind of unusual, but, we do see people that have a motor neuron disease happen in their families, even if we cannot identify a gene. Specifically, with the currently available commercial gene panels, it's been estimated that we can identify a gene in families that have a motor neuron disease in about 75% of the times. So we still have a 25% of families where clearly the disease goes from one generation to the other, but we don't know the gene, or we don't know it yet. So again, the results of the genetic tests are kind of very helpful. Obviously, if they're positive in the sense that they positively confirm the diagnosis, not only that, but also give kind of a clear answer in terms of the gene involved. But if it's negative, it does not exclude the diagnosis, because again, we only know the gene, even in families where clearly there is a genetic component, only in 75% of the people, because simply we haven't discovered all the genes yet, unfortunately.
Dr. Paganoni, someone says, Kathy says, can you please speak about the startle reflex as a symptom for PLS?
Yes, there's a few symptoms that are a little bit sort of unusual, and sometimes they can happen in conjunction with upper motor neuron diseases. The startle reflex being one of them. Some people have a lot of yawning. I've heard people say the hiccups. So there's a few things that are basically driven by sort of a balance in the motor system, driven by upper motor neuron problems, as in PLS. And so these are things that have been reported. It doesn't carry any specific significance. I can just tell you that it can happen, and everyone again experiences that in a different way.
Well, you guys, we're getting close to the hour, and I want to appreciate Dr. Sabrina for all of her time and information. It's just been very enlightening. Do you guys appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk with her directly? Let's all give her a great big hand and appreciation. Thumbs up. There you go. I love that. And we'll take another question. We've got just a few more minutes. Thank you, Martin. I appreciate that. I did see a comment here from Jeff about his wife and PLS. I'm glad that you were able to get that confirmed. That's wonderful. We're on, there's more questions there about the medication. I don't know that I've missed one. Burning mouth syndrome. What is the best medicine for burning mouth syndrome, and how common is it for PLS?
Yeah, we briefly referred to that before. I will say, first of all, one needs to make sure that we know the causes of that symptom and make sure that we're not missing any treatable cause. And then again, if it's truly neuropathic pain, maybe one can consider medications for neuropathic pain, but again, talk to your physician just to make sure other things have been looked at. I do see a question that's been put a couple of times there in terms of the edema or swelling in the feet and legs. Just want to make a comment there. That's actually very common, not just in PLS, but in any condition really that affects somebody's ability to walk. So if people stay essentially sitting a lot of time during the day, there can be some swelling simply because of lack of movement or limited movement. So I will say one thing that's important to do is to try to prevent that, because it's, you don't want over time that to lead to persistent swelling. So, talk to your doctor, but again, things like elevating the legs, intermittently during the day, maybe when you're sitting at a couch or being at home and able to do that, that can be very helpful. Or using compression compression socks that now are widely available and actually look nicer than the ones that were look actually very nice. In the past, they were medical products, but now they're just kind of commercial products. So you can buy, compression socks on Amazon or any other store, and they can be quite helpful in trying to prevent that.
There's one question here about a reoccurring problem where my right eyelid and facial muscles stop working and causes my eye to close. The left eye usually follows. Is this common?
To be honest with you, I've not heard of that. So you may want to talk to your physician, because I'm not sure. Actually, I have not seen that. I wonder if there's something else going on. I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, there was, I think you did have a couple of questions, maybe a question or two from the list that we didn't answer last meeting. Do you still have those available, Dr. Paganoni? You could grab one of those and then we'll go out with that being our last question.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen people ask, again, what can I do? It's frustrating because there's, I keep hearing there's nothing I can do, and so I will say that, first of all, everything that you're doing to preserve muscle muscle tone, joint motion, and all those things are actually very important. So it's not like, things like gentle exercise, stretching. We're trying to develop actually some videos and some ideas for exercise and even adaptive sports, being engaged in the community, some community-based exercises, and I'll definitely keep you posted. But all these things are not nothing. I mean, I understand that obviously one, having drugs or surgeries or other things is what we're all trying to develop. But I just want to say that, engaging with regular physical therapy exercises or other things, and learning about new assisted technology. I will say there's a lot of new assisted technology coming out these days, not completely ready for now, but, I do want to encourage everyone to think about all the great technological things that are coming out in terms of communication devices, devices for function. I know we're not quite there yet, but I do want to say that those are coming out. And so hopefully over the next few years, we'll see a lot more being offered in terms of tools for daily living and for communication that are actually, important. So I'm definitely doing a little bit of research on that. And so we'll continue to try to push forward.